So we must do two things, two great things together, to encompass that enormous new view that lies before us, but to encompass it within the framework of science, to see it within the whole categorical framework of science, and to see that these two are not separate, but that they are wedded. The bigness of the idea, the newness of the idea, the greatness of it is one with the structure of science, the structure of being itself.
We have been given, we've seen that in the step from the 6th to the 7,000 year period, we have been given two great tables prepared for us through the work of John W. Dorley and Max Kapler. And now we have to, so to say, sit down at those tables to partake of those tables that are already set, that are filled with the fullness of life. And we have to partake of those tables. Remember, Mrs. Eddy said something quite reminiscent of that. She said, I begin at the feet of Christ and with the numeration table of Christian Science. She speaks of crumbs of comfort from Christ's table. She very often links up in her use of table Christ, which is Christ is always the calculus, isn't it? She links the Christ very much with the table. Christ's table, crumbs of comfort. Beautiful sense that every point of intersection is there, that no matter what aspect of that whole loaf of truth we need, that whole table, that it's there for us. It even will come as a crumb. If we're at the point where we need a crumb, we will get that crumb. And the crumb is holistic. Huh? It's holistic. Yeah, it's the whole. Every crumb is the whole from truth's standpoint. So we have to take in these tables. We have to imbibe them, digest them. What is it they say? You are what you eat. Or you become what you eat. So we need to assimilate, really, the whole content of truth and love. To study thoroughly the letter and imbibe the Spirit. Study thoroughly the letter, that means to get the concepts right. We will do that very much over these remaining days, to get the concepts right about these two tables. To study that letter thoroughly. Then we must imbibe the spirit of it. Actually, I say we must. And every time I hear myself say that, I think, no. It's in the dynamic. It's in the dynamic. All the movement there is or can be is in the dynamic of the logic of that which we are taking in, that which we are conceiving of as we form the true concept of what these tables are, that within that conceptualization, which is a spiritual, essentially spiritual conceptualization, It's mental at that point, but it is spiritually mental. Not humanly mental, not mortally mental, but spiritually mental. And so within the thoroughness of the study of the letter is the Christ dynamic to move us on to the imbibing of the Spirit. That the Spirit is imbibed. It is there. It's right there as we touch that true concept. We call this concept building, tonality building. But you see what we mean? That it's a beautiful movement that is love-driven, love-attracted. So we imbibe the Spirit until really we become that anointed one that we saw in the 6th statement of the 23rd Psalm, that then we are the anointed of love. We are becoming the Christ consciousness. We are becoming the Christ consciousness. Until we see we are those tables. We are that table that we call the model of being. So you hear it begins with concept building, that we will work on that true and correct concept of what we do. We will at the same time build the tone, the love of it, the warmth of it, the practicality of it, until it becomes consciousness to us, until we, so to say, feel the dominion of it, that we begin to master the infinite idea, as the textbook says. The admission to oneself that man is God's own likeness, the admission to ourselves that we are the likeness of these tables, is going to reveal to us that we are the master. We become the master. We master the infinite idea. It's only a way of saying it's our consciousness. And finally, we see that we have that being building, concept building, tonality building, consciousness building, all for the end to see that we are what we are looking at. We are what we are considering together this week. We actually are it. And these break in, the consciousness, of course the tonality, the consciousness, the being, the awareness of being what we are looking at, all break in. They all fluctuate in and break in on us, and we get those touches, those glimpses of the greatness of what we do. You see that John Dorley caught the message of the language of spirit in his matrix. He caught the message of the 7,000-year period. That matrix is written in the language of the 7,000-year period, as is the model of being, as we said. This is the language of the redundancy principle. And what does that mean for us? if it's written in the language of the redundancy principle, it includes all other languages within itself. All other languages, all the languages from the previous 1,000-year period standpoints within itself. We will see this. And that means also that we will always find more than we have already seen. This is so contrary to the human concept. The human concept says if you reduce everything to only 15 terms, you don't have anything but 15 terms. You have nothing. You've gone the wrong direction. You should become more prolific. You should have more words about when you're explaining being. You should have more words. And the whole drive, the whole attraction of love is to have less and less and less. But in that which is less is the infinite. That if we touch the language of the capitalized terms, by golly, we will forever see that which is new. We will forever see more and more and more. So how could he have deduced that matrix first? Only through his spiritual sense, his spiritual intuition, his love, his deep consecration for the fundamentals, for those days of creation which became numerals of infinity to him and which became synonymous terms to him, that he went through that development in his own consciousness until he was those synonymous terms. He was those capitalized terms. And so it was a spiritual naturalness, a spiritual intuitiveness, a spiritual logos within him, or logic within him. His scientific sense decoded that whole proposition. And he had, as we know, no text. Having no text means that matrix is a deductive matrix. It is a divinely deductive matrix. He had no text with which he worked. If we look at our other matrices, such as the matrix of the prophets, or the Christ matrix, the matrix of the epistles, or the Christianity matrix, or the textbook matrix of Christian Science, these are inductive matrices. They are formulated from a text through the inductive method of science. So he relied on that deduction, that divine deduction, and really brought to light a new sense of creativity, a new sense of the creative order, that he began to see that actually the 4 too are creative. We always think of the 7, especially in the word order, as being creative, but he saw that the 4 themselves are creative, and that in every order, therefore, you have a start to that order at the word point, the point of the word, that order then has a logical development or logical course over which it runs. That logic is brought out through the Christ. It brings forth a result or an effect at the point of Christianity, brings forth a conclusion, And finally, he could see that that all three, that we want to call it the input, the processing, the output, the Word, the Christ, Christianity, all together are science. All belong to the feedback principle and feedback through that principle back to the Word again. So that you have a great creativity going on through the four, that the four give to the seven a creative aspect that is non-linear, we could say. It's non-linear, so that those orders that look linear to us, appear to be linear to us, laid out in a linear order, they appear to have a start and a finish and a middle to them. But by virtue of that fourth aspect of science, of the feedback principle, that feedback principle renders them non-linear. They never have a finish. They never come to an end. There's continually a feeding back, feeding back, feeding back. And in the matrix we will see that in every order there is a feeding back of that order to itself and a feeding forward of that order to the next order, until the conclusion at the point of science itself, of science as science in the matrix, and then you have a great feeding back to the divine principle and the principle of science itself. So